Hey guys, Sarah here. As some of you may know, I have been recovering from my concussion. So there's been a lot of doctor appointments. And of course, with these doctor appointments come 3 life lessons I am learning from these wonderful metaphors. So the 3 main points that I'm going to go over, or at least the 3 metaphors I'm going to go over, are equilibrium, depth of perception, and tracking. I have my notes here on my phone because even though I have my computer right here, I can't really see. Well, I mean, I can kind of see, but I can't really read the words. So bear with me. I am still going to be touching my eye a lot. For a little bit of context, I'm not really going to go too much into like how I got my concussion because I feel like I've talked about that enough. But in terms of my recovery with my concussion, my equilibrium is still way off. And for context, I am someone who is normally very active physically, and I love my sports. I have lived my whole life having some sort of physical activity, and a couple of years ago found out I have combined ADHD, which now makes sense. So some of the things that I am terribly missing right now are dancing, climbing, walking my dog. I would love to go take my dog out for a nice walk in the sun where my eyes aren't hurting. Although I have made progress in being able to stand a little bit more, or at least longer, I am able to walk a little bit more now. Very limited, but still, I will take it. The things I am really struggling with still are essentially making any left turns, right turns, 180 turns, U-turns, any type of turn you want to call it is very hard. It makes me nauseous. I feel confused, disoriented. I don't know how to pronounce it right now. Actually, let me get disoriented. There you go. What they said. Disoriented. And man, what an epiphany. I don't know about you, but I am very much someone who can get distracted by things that I get excited about. Really, mostly people I'm excited for or excited about. I can also get very distracted with my fear, my anxieties, and a lot of times those distractions, especially when I'm moving fast, which I will say for myself, and again, now knowing I have combined ADHD makes complete sense, but I kind of like to keep things moving. I like to make sure I am moving forward, that I'm not stagnant, that I'm achieving my goals, especially because I already feel like I'm constantly trying to catch up or that I'm feeling behind. But here's the thing I am learning with my equilibrium being off and unbalanced and my brain being sensitive while I recover. I can only move up to a certain speed before I start to feel confused. It kind of makes me think about my tendency to want to keep things moving and asking myself, okay, how fast am I really moving? And at what point is it too fast that it's creating some sort of cognitive distortion or confusion or dizziness from the perspective of where I'm trying to go. Because not only am I not realizing how fast I'm moving because I'm coming from an internal perspective, but I have a tendency to also not feel the impact and the consequences of going faster than I should until I hit stop or brake. So if I don't know the level of impact, or at least I don't know how it's going to feel, I am more likely to keep going in that speed unless I am intentionally trying to be present and aware of what's going on in all levels. And I'm experiencing this weird thing right now where I know my body can go faster, and I'm so tempted to go as fast as my body can. That's like instinct at this point. But my brain just my literal brain can't handle it. My literal brain gets confused and I get off balance, and then it affects more later on, whether struggling with my light sensitivities even more, or struggling with reading and comprehension afterwards for a bit, and having to just close my eyes and recalibrate in whatever way I'm able to in that moment. It's interesting because I learn best through metaphors and symbolism, and that's just kind of my baseline. Everything else I have to translate. Also, I'm closing my eyes a lot because it's just the only way I'm going to be able to like think and talk at the same time as much as I'm able to right now. There is this parallel of the physical and the mental and emotional / spiritual. And I am realizing how much I need to accept the pace that I'm in, accept the pacing in which my brain is able to recover. And it's also kind of like accepting the pacing in which my body is able to recover from the trauma I've been through, traumas, I should say. Accept the pacing in which my spirit recovers and starts to feel alive again. Accept the pacing in which other people are going through in their life. And in the midst of that acceptance, that's when I'm really able to stay grounded and present. Because even though it feels slow, especially for someone like me, whew, and oh man, I a lot of times I feel like when I'm walking with my dog just trots along, looks up like, okay, I guess we're walking, kinda, we're walking, but this isn't how we normally walk, mother. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, no, but honestly, she will look up and like check in and be like, okay, yeah, we're walking like this. But then afterwards she chills out. And I'm like, dang, my dog is better at chilling at this space than I am. And it's such an interesting metaphor and symbolism to see in real life as it's happening internally for me, that I start to realize, okay, this is the time for me to learn this. I actually genuinely really need to learn this now, because the amount of times I've gone through similar things in my life, and it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to keep going through it until I learn it, you know? So slow down, Sarah, and just be with your dog, who is laying in front of me and you can't see, but she is quite attached to me right now because it's been a hard day for me, not for her. But yeah, the other part of the equilibrium thing is turning, whether left, right, or 180s, And I say 180s because I'm a dog trainer, but really U-turns. It's almost like I have a sign in front of me that says no left turn, no right turn, no U-turn. It's just a one-way highway, and that's all there is. I guess I shouldn't say one-way highway because that implies a faster speed, and we just said that we're not going to go fast. So a one-way, I don't know, school zone. I don't know. Let's just say that. Let's just say that. Not sure if that's the best metaphor for the environment, but we're just going to say that. And I feel like I understand in a logical level that people come and go, right? Not everyone is meant to stay with us in the long run. And not everyone has the same purpose as us, as our individual journeys. And while logically I know that, emotionally it's still really hard for me because I am very much the kind of person that my inner circle stays small because I only have so much capacity emotionally. And I really hold on to the people I love and to those that get inside the inner circle. And it's always cut deep for me whenever I go through transitions like that. And I'm not talking about one specific type of dynamic. I mean, like anyone that's in my inner circle, especially like best friends and stuff, right? But I think this is the first time in my life where it might be hard, but I am finally at peace with letting people go, even though they were in those innermost circles of my heart. Because on a physical level, going back to the consequences of, or I don't know if consequences is the word, but I guess side effects of my concussion, whenever my gaze switches paired with a turn, again, I feel disoriented. I feel confused, and I'm just not able to feel grounded as fast as I did prior to the concussion. And I feel like I've gone through this type of stuff enough times in my life. I'm just so tired. I'm so tired of attempting to start my life all over again, or at least feel like I'm starting my life all over again just because I made a left turn or I made a right turn or I made a U-turn because somebody I cared about went that way. And I was like, yo, hold up. I want to be with you. I think I'm just so tired of having to recenter myself and reground just so I can get back into alignment of where I was going. All because I got caught up in a certain dynamic and got attached to it. And it's so exhausting. It's so tiring and exhausting to hold on to any relationship or dynamic that wants to go a different way. And each time I even think or consider that relationship or dynamic, it's like I can already feel myself feeling confused again. I can already feel being off balance. I can already feel that I'm not as grounded. Just the thought of those people, or just the thought of being around that energy. And this recovery from my concussion, so annoying with how long it's taking. And I just can't help but think like, wow, I've been doing that each time I held on to any relationship or dynamic, or I even considered or tried to find a way to hold on to them. And that's really why certain traumas keeps coming back, or really why I keep having to heal the same wounds over and over and over again. It's sometimes it's not because I haven't done enough. It's not because you haven't done enough. It's just because we're around same people with different names and we're repeating the patterns, and the recovery from feeling confused and unaligned still takes time. At that point, it's like, okay, what matters to me more? Yes, relationships matter to me a lot, but while that can be a strength, it can also be my downfall. And I am learning how much I hate feeling confused and how much I hate feeling wobbly and that I can't walk forward, I can't move forward. And what if the reason that I keep feeling like I'm not where I want to be yet or where I should be, whatever that is really just because I keep choosing other people over myself. Now, just a disclaimer, I can't talk. Now, just a disclaimer, this is not meant to promote just focusing so much on ourselves that we don't pour into our community and we don't build community and we don't pour into the people we love and the people that we say matter to us. I'm a firm believer that at the end of the day, when we die, we're not going to be there surrounded by hundreds of people that celebrate us from afar or whatever, whatever the path is. I know that if I died tomorrow, I know who I want to be there and I know who matters to me the most. And if that's the case, then I still want to be able to pour into those people and nurture those relationships. So I'm not saying not to do any of that, just disclaimer. But there is my history, my pattern of getting so caught up in those relationships and the pain of the betrayal or the pain of the loss or the pain of feeling misunderstood, pain of losing time, that I held on longer than I should have. And unfortunately, it's taking my concussion for me to get here, but I am finally learning. And I say finally very loosely because I'm saying finally in context of present Sarah or current Sarah. But who knows what life lessons I'm going to learn next. But yeah, I think I am grateful that in the midst of these lessons, in the midst of having to exercise these muscles that are used to only lifting 10 pounds and are now having to lift 20 pounds, that I'm at peace. And that's nice. It's nice to feel aligned from head to toe in the path that I'm on and to know that, okay, I'm walking forward. Notice I didn't say straight because Lord knows, sometimes I think I'm walking straight, but it's not as straight as it would be if I was fully recovered. And I think that's the thing, right? Is like I tend to think that forward means straight, that there's no room for imperfections or there's no room for play in terms of, testing things out and exploring and figuring out my path. Like there is room for that because forward doesn't necessarily mean perfectly straight. And that is such a nice distinction. And in the midst of me figuring things out as I keep taking steps forward, I'm grateful for just the reminder that as I keep going, I do get to see who I am in alignment with and who I'm not in alignment with. And I'm grateful to slowly discern and trust my intuition in who is right for the moment and who has the potential to actually be with me for the long run, to slowly discern the difference and to give room for the times that should those people make their own left turns, right turns, or U-turns, that feeling confused about my existence and my purpose and all that isn't worth or anything, because that's exhausting to try the repetition of like having to climb out of that hole of feeling numb and all that. It's just not worth having to go through that all over again. Anyways, all that to say, it's nice to simultaneously feel the sadness of the transition, but also be at peace to just keep moving forward and not go back to anything from the past. Mostly speaking about people, but the next thing is depth of perception. And if you are still with me, I want to thank you because I know this has been quite a video. So with my concussion, I found out after having both my eyes tested, essentially a ton of tests, that I thought it was just my right eye that was like messed up, because physically that was the most evident for me. I could feel it the most. I could feel it getting tired and strained way faster. But I actually found out that right now, or at least after the concussion, my eyes have two different depths of field or depth of perception. And it's also, how do I say it? It's also one of those things where each eye is essentially doing their own thing, and my eyes aren't able to come together to work together and to partner for that binocular vision. And that is contributing to me having a hard time actually reading and comprehending and all that type of stuff. For me right now, images are significantly easier in comparison to words. Like I've said before, it's a lot easier for me to share things just from inside of my head, inside of my own thoughts. Anything that requires me to see it and have some sort of input and translate and all that type of stuff is like, it's just so much harder, and it takes a lot of time. And I realized I have battled with my sense of depth, or I don't even know if it's my sense of depth, it's just my depth. The depth that I feel, the depth that I see things. I have battled with myself my whole life regarding feeling just so different from most people, and I just didn't feel like I belong, and I still battle with that and wrestle with that when I feel like I'm having a hard time finding people that are more or less in the same wavelength. And I say that not as a, it's neither good nor bad, whatever that wavelength is or whatever that depth is. It's more so just a sense of lack of alignment that I interpreted as me not belonging in this world. I'm learning that while there is room for two people to not be perfectly in the same level of depth, if we're too far apart, or if we're, our distance from each other surpasses a certain degree, it's just so hard to work together. It's so hard. I'll put it this way. My right eye feels like, I don't know if this is technical, so don't quote me on this. I have not gone over my test results, and I probably wouldn't remember it anyways if I did. But my right eye feels like anything, let's say, too close is too much pressure and blurry, and it literally feels so uncomfortable that my body will physically have the reaction of like trying to move backwards so that I can see it clearly. And then there's the other end where my right eye will also start to see things blurry, and the spatial perception is off the further it gets. And my left eye is doing something different. My left eye is comfortable with things way closer to it, significantly closer to it. And it's fine. I don't have a physical reaction. And then there's the other end where the further it gets, then the blurrier it gets. But that might be closer than the distance of my right eye, if that makes any sense. Hopefully it does. If it doesn't, let me know and I'll try to re-say it again a different way. But imagine if those were two different people, right? Let's just say person A, person B. Person A is comfortable with a certain level of closeness, up to as close as, right next to them, and then gets uncomfortable and has some cognitive distortion or so, more or less, when it gets further, because the spatial perception is different from from person B. And person B has a different threshold and feels extremely uncomfortable with anything too close and needs a certain distance to see things clearly, but then also sees things in a skewed perspective the further away they are, because they have a different spatial perception and everything. And on a physical level, the amount of work my eyes have to do just to get them to align so that I can read, and then the length of time that I can hold that before my eyes need a break, and how much tension my body carries the whole entire time it's forcing my eyes to go into alignment. It's like, holy crap, that's what I can do in my relationships. I try so hard to kind of shove aside my depth or the way I think or the way I feel and just the way I see life at a baseline. And while it is good to learn how to understand other people that speak differently and learn how to translate and all that, interpersonal skills are very important. However, developing those skills aren't the same as forcing things into alignment as you walk towards your destination or your goal or your purpose. And the strain that it has brought to my body and my soul and spirit, and the way it's exacerbated certain messaging I've worked through and healed through in the past, but have to keep going through over and over and over. The way it strains me away from healing and purpose is something that, yes, I know logically, but I forget how that feels when I'm so caught in it. And the test I had to do for my eyes to get them to work together was such a representation of okay, when I have to really try to bring my eyes together, because there's the depth of perception is so far apart, or at least it feels so far apart, right? I know it's not my normal. I know that's not where I live. And yet I'm trying to recover and heal. And despite me wanting to recover and heal, it doesn't make it any easier to try and bring things together. Oopsie. But it doesn't make it any easier to bring things together. My desire for healing does not determine the level of difficulty it's going to be, whether it's my eyes or a dynamic. And I mean, thankfully, despite the fact that this is going to be a long recovery, there is hope because of vision therapy. But this is going to be a lot of training, a lot of therapy. So yeah, is it really worth forcing a dynamic to work? Or is it even worth holding on to if it's causing so much strain in other areas of my life? So much so that my perspective and the clarity of my vision becomes skewed. I'm just no, it's not. Because having to go through vision therapy really puts into perspective. No pun intended, but it is so true. There is a lot to this section of video when it comes to like depth of perception and spatial and all that type of stuff. The other thing is, like, we talked about depth in terms of our own individual depth. And I also have to consider like our capacity, because I don't think our depth has to be exactly the same amount or same number or whatever, but I do think it needs to be close enough that it comes into alignment, into partnership with less strain. Either way, there's going to be a level of strain. So avoiding strain isn't the purpose. Avoiding work isn't the purpose. Avoiding adjustments or adjusting or flexibility that is not, it's not the purpose. It's about understanding that we're already going to have other strains in our life. And if we want to be purpose driven, or if we want to maintain this path to our purpose, we have to be able to genuinely come together and partner together and see one vision or binocular vision, as opposed to me right now having double vision, which I didn't even know until I did the testings. Metaphor is there. But yeah, I think it is going to take a lot of knowing ourselves and knowing our capacity and creating acceptance, or having grace and accepting our depth, whatever that is, and our capacity, and being okay to let go of dynamics that seem to be at a similar level of depth temporarily, but have a different capacity, and therefore we eventually need to let it go. Or being okay with just feeling so much strain and tension, it feels like we're carrying the relationship and the dynamic, that we just say, okay, yeah, this is too much strain on my eyes and my vision. I'm no longer walking in alignment with my purpose. So the last thing that I wanted to kind of add in with depth, which is really more about, it's really more a combination of things, including like with light and all that. But one of the things that I am going through with my concussion is the light sensitivity. And it has been so hard to understand and comprehend my environment, or understand and comprehend my own thoughts, even if I'm outside and I'm out in the sun. And I would have to wear sunglasses just for me to get some sort of relief, so I can kind of somewhat open my eyes and gain some sort of perspective again. So there's this threshold for me right now that's so different from before, and it's hard for me to kind of relax in, for better or for worse. Essentially, if I am somewhere that, you know, let's say like fluorescent lights and everything are a little harsh, or it's brighter, I have a significantly harder time using any cognitive function, and even just like keeping my eyes open or processing. And then I'll start hearing ringing in my ears as well. It isn't until I get into a certain level of darkness, or perceived darkness, that my eyes can relax, my head can relax, my body can breathe, that my breath becomes regular again. And that to me got me thinking about like, okay, so if we try to force dynamics in relationships where our depth is slightly different, there's room to still embrace both the light and the shadows, because our depth has less strain, right? For it to work together, we have binocular vision with less strain in the relationship. Now, if our depth is significantly different from another person's, when there's already a lot of strain, and relationships tend to be mirrors, we will shine light into the other shadows, then at some point that light is going to be too much and too overwhelming for the other person that is still in their own journey and their own growth and their own spiritual awakening, for lack of better words. And when we are living at our baseline that is at a different place from the other person's, they're going to constantly feel overwhelmed. And even if it's not our intent, even if we're not criticizing, even if we're not talking about anything that's like directly related to them, it can still create this sense of pressure because they're striving to understand and translate the way we are living while there's too much light shining on their shadows. It's like if it was a photo, it'd be completely overexposed and the details are now gone, and it's causing more distortion than it is helping. Because the reality is, like, if we want a beautiful photo, and this is me being a nerd because I love photography, but anyways, if we want a beautiful photo, we have to have acceptance and grace and see the beauty in the shadows. We got to be able to see the mid-tones and then the brighter tones. Like, it can't be so overexposed that you shine light in all areas of the picture. And a lot of times, if there's that distance that's too big and too wide, then we can overexpose every corner of the picture, and the other person can lose the details of themselves, all in the effort of trying to catch up. I know I'm guilty of that because I tend to think, or I used to think, well, if we just talk about these things and we, discuss them, and I'm here and we show compassion and empathy, that I think it can be fine, it can work. But the thing I'm learning with my concussion and light sensitivity is, even if we hold space, even if I hold space for all of the light to come through without sunglasses, I will feel so out of balance and I can't function. And my nervous system will constantly feel stressed because I'm not able to even really breathe and process because there's too much. And it's actually those sunglasses, the things that will bring some shadows back in, that will provide that relief. And while, I don't necessarily think shadows are bad, I don't think that logically, but if I am, in a sense, imposing my depth onto someone else, or imposing my revelations and epiphanies or whatever to somebody who isn't ready for it, and to somebody who is not there yet, it doesn't matter if I hold space for them in those moments. If it's over their threshold and they don't have the capacity for that, I'm exposing every corner of their lives to them. They're going to need to retreat back to their shadows just to get a sense of relief. And the further we are from each other in our level of depth, the harder it's going to be for them to come back in to the light, or to find that balance without those sunglasses. Again, the more strain there already is, then the faster we are likely to get exhausted in these dynamics when light starts to shine on the shadows. And the faster we're going to need to, for lack of better words, get out of that dynamic just to get some sort of relief or get space away from it. I'm noticing that it's so hard to, really find those people that are at the same, more or less, same level of depth, or have the same depth of field, however you want to call it. Because I already know that's hard. I don't even consider that we have different capacities for how much light we can receive at a time, how many of our shadows are, or how much of our shadows can handle light at a time. We can be willing, it's like, even if the other person is willing to grow and do the work and all that, if we're starting at two different places and we've done more shadow work that's significantly more than the other, our capacity to hold light is going to be more than the other. So, again, I'm not here to say what is right or what is wrong. I'm not even here to say what that threshold is or what's going to provide that balance. I'm more so saying, like, these are things that I'm realizing would be good to consider, to learn about ourselves and to ask ourselves, like, okay, if I was to be real and honest with myself, how much capacity do I have for another person to shine light on my shadows? And how much capacity does the other person need to have in order for both of us to not feel as strained while we try to move forward? And I don't have answers for anyone else other than me, right? I can't determine that. And there's no grading system for that. So there's no right or wrong. And I think that's the hard part, because we know there is no like right or wrong that's like clear to the T. And instead, it's going to require us to individually kind of be present and find that area that helps us stay grounded, where our equilibrium isn't off, where our depth of field isn't skewing our perspective, or where our baseline is at when we can sense we're at peace and there's no strain. And then also feel and be present with how much strain there actually is in the different dynamics of our lives. And consider, like, is this a dynamic that is just temporary, or is this a dynamic that can minimize the strain at a baseline because they're both individually ready for it? When we try to come together with binocular vision, there's not as much tension. And because there's not as much tension as a foundation there, again, doesn't mean that there's no work, because there's a lot of work to be done, right? But it's more individual work, not necessarily like working hard to like pull the other person into alignment with us. If that's our foundation with another person, then we have more capacity to carry strain and tension or pressure from other areas of life as we both walk towards our purpose and still maintain walking towards our purpose. Yeah, that's a lot. I'll move on to the third and last one, which is probably going to have a few different points, so bear with me here. Last point, or metaphor, is tracking, which is really just a combination of the first two, I think, in a sense. But as part of my testing, or as part of my vision therapy, one of the things that they were testing was each eye's ability to track. And this is my interpretation, not necessarily the technical stuff, so don't quote me on this. But I noticed that each eye had their own struggles in tracking stuff, and that struggle can decrease or increase depending on the angle in which it's coming at towards my eye. And unfortunately, each eye is doing their own thing right now. Quite wonderful. And I had a harder time tracking with my right eye in more areas than my left. And what I mean by that is, like, my right eye struggled to track things outside. I don't even know how to say unless you're watching the video, but this side of my peripheral, and also top and bottom. My left eye could see more and see things clearly from other angles, including inside and outside, top and bottom, but was also getting more nauseous with certain, I don't know, when tracking things from certain areas. So kind of goes back to the whole, okay, I'm walking forward and it's okay to walk forward slowly because I'm still walking forward, and that walking forward does not mean straight or perfect. It goes back to that, right? But then with the added layer of when we're attempting to partner with another person or another dynamic, whether that be a friendship, a romantic relationship, a business partner, family, whatever that dynamic is, we still need to have an understanding of our individual abilities to track our purpose, and also get an understanding of like what it takes or how long it takes for us to get back to it. Should we look elsewhere temporarily, or look left or right? Not make a turn, but even if we look left or right, like how long does it take for us to track and focus on that purpose again, and then interpret it, and then be able to move towards it? Because it's multiple transitions, but it kind of starts at like tracking it. So if we're partnering with anyone and you're passionate about something, or you're not passionate about something, and they are, if we're not in alignment in those areas, and our ability to track and recognize what we're passionate about or what we are hoping for in our lives, and what we want, and what lights up our fire, and what brings us joy, whatever it is, if we don't know those things and we can't really track it, and we don't know how to interpret it, and we don't know how to get back to it when we look left or right, then that's going to put a lot of strain in any relationship or partnership. And I think a lot of times we might think more about what the other person should be like, whatever our image of them should be or is, that we're not getting really clear about how our tracking is and which areas need improvement to get back into alignment faster, or which guardrails and boundaries need to be set up so that we don't stray too far to begin with. And I know for me, while I am very purpose driven and I know where I want to go, my downfall is I start to loosen those boundaries because I care so much. And it's gotta be more than just knowing my purpose. I have to be able to also consider, should I get distracted? One, how much time do I have to regroup and get back to it, and create acceptance for that, and then create boundaries that are appropriate to set me up for success in that area. And then just being okay that that's where I'm at as well. Because if I'm not okay, or if I don't create space for that, if I don't accept that, I'm not going to want to create the right boundaries, because I'm going to want to just do better and hold myself to a certain standard, as opposed to not letting shame and guilt creep in, and just being okay that I might need tighter boundaries in certain areas. On the other end, considering other people's current place in their journey, I don't think we need to have every detail of the picture in terms of knowing what we want in life, because we don't know what we don't know, right? We don't know when things might change for us or shift and all that, but we can learn a lot about ourselves if we're intentional, and at least have a better idea of what kind of life will be fulfilling for us and what calls to us, and know those things enough that we can actually visualize and picture it so that we understand our window of what may work or what may not, so that we can kind of toss things aside faster. And I said things, not people. I'm not trying to say toss people, saying, but say no to things that aren't in alignment and cause less pain to others and to ourselves, because we're always going to have an impact, right? And while we may not be perfect and we may not know everything, I think being committed to doing that work at least helps not just other people around us, but helps us not have to go through more unnecessary things, because life's already going to do enough of that. And when I think about that, I kind of start to think like, how do we learn more about the other person to get an idea of what brings them joy or what they're passionate about, or, what their driving force is in life? Like, which of their values are taking the driver's seat and which of their values are in the passenger seat? And when we're talking passenger seat, which of their values are like right there next to the driver and which of their values are like the kids in the back? You know what I'm saying? Like, I think, again, I don't necessarily have answers or specific ways in which each person can learn those things about another person. But I do think it is good and valuable to consider those visuals as we start to understand, or as we build community and try to figure out which of our relationships we can invest in more, because we all only have a certain threshold, I guess. We all have, it might be different. I definitely have a lower lower threshold when it comes to the amount of people I can pour into, and so that I still am mentally and emotionally balanced. So other people, like you might have a wider threshold. So if that's the case, then the number of people that you can invest in is probably going to be significantly more than me. And that is wonderful and that is great. At the same time, just because we can handle more doesn't mean we should dismiss where or who our energy goes to. The more we just lackadaisically throw our energy here and there, the more time we're taking to look left or right, which means, am I spending more time investing than I have time to get back to the right thing and track the right thing? Or am I investing a lot, but with people who are tracking with me, even if it's just temporarily or even if it's just for the season, but they're tracking with me, and therefore my gaze doesn't have to move as far away from my target. I can see them from my peripheral because we're individually carrying and tracking our load, essentially. Or we're individually carrying our load and tracking our purpose. I should say it like that. Again, to each his own. What might feel 20 pounds for me might feel 5 pounds to another person. And if so, then adjust as you see fit. As someone who has combined ADHD as well, transitions are really, really hard for me. And I've been so hard on myself that I don't create space for how much time it actually takes for me to transition. That can affect my relationships and the relationships I hold on to or let go of. If I just created more acceptance and space for how my brain needs transition time, and how some people who may move a little too fast, like I may not be able to keep up, for lack of better words, but connotation of keeping up sucks. So don't hold on to that. But you know what I'm saying? If someone is quicker in their transition and they have a different expectation for their journey, then I'm not going to be able to walk in alignment with that, and that should be okay. And vice versa. If my pacing, despite me feeling like I need a lot of transition time, it may still not be enough for someone else. And if that's the case, then at some point I'm going to have to let them go and let them track in whatever speed they find their purpose. All of us have different pacings in our different seasons. Sometimes people can have growth spurts. And if that's something that you think brings you both in alignment, then that might work. For me, I think I'm starting to get to know myself enough that what was knowledge before is now being accepted into my body, because I knew certain things, or I knew things about myself, but I resisted for multiple reasons. I am now slowly, and not in a straight way, but it's still forward. I'm finding peace in, okay, this is where I'm at with my depth, and this is my baseline, and this is where I live. If you've hung around with me enough and you've watched enough of my videos, you'll see, okay, I laugh a lot with my friends. We make a lot of jokes. I love things playful, but I love depth and playfulness together, not just one or the other. I knew these things about myself for a long time, and I have desired to live a life within those values for a long time, along with a few of my other values that's going to be in a different video at some point, another day, who knows when. But just because I knew those things and could intellectualize them doesn't mean that I had created space for it in my heart and in my body and my spirit. And it is just now starting to, again, come into alignment from head to toe. I am allowing myself to breathe them in and breathe them out. It's not going to be a straight path for me, but I am finding peace in moving forward, even if it feels like I'm dying from the slowness. Who knows? Maybe another metaphor for the death and the slowness, death of the ego. I don't know. Who knows? Anyways, this has been a lot. I don't know, this has been something I've been thinking about for a while, and it feels like I just kept getting metaphors and metaphors and metaphors, and it's still coming right now as we talk. So if you have made it this far, thank you again for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking and subscribing. I hope to see you guys next time.